Hello everyone, thank you for attending our webinar, Find the Poison Needles in a Haystack Before It's Too Late. I am your host, Mindy Stubbs, Demand Generation Coordinator here at Optive. Before we get started, a few items of housekeeping. First, this webinar is being recorded and will be available in the next few days for on-demand viewing. You can see here on the console that we have several resources you can use during or following the webinar. This includes some resources we think you'll find valuable when it comes to your security program. You'll also notice our speaker bio, social sharing buttons, and the Q&A chat box. You'll find all these same widgets on the toolbar as you scroll to the bottom of your screen. Regarding the Q&A chat box, we will have someone monitoring the chat box throughout the webinar and during the Q&A period. However, we may not get to every question, so if we don't answer yours, we'll be sure to follow up after the webinar. Now onto the webcast. Let me take a moment to introduce our speakers, Brian Drexler and Antonio Sanchez. Brian Drexler is a 25-year IT veteran with expertise in security and networking solutions. Having started his career as a consultant at Capgemini, Brian has been able to leverage the business-first approach to solving client issues. He has been focused on information security for a number of years, currently serving as a solutions architect at Optive Security. Antonio Sanchez is a senior product marketing manager at ForcePoint and is focused on helping organizations improve their security posture. Antonio is a technology veteran with experience in product marketing, product management, brand management, and sales. Now I'll pass it over to our speaker, Antonio.
Okay, thank you, Mindy. Thank you for everyone for joining us today. We appreciate the opportunity to be able to work with Optive and speak to your audience here today. So the agenda we have for today is going to be around UEBA, and we'll get into in just a moment on what that means. We'll talk about what it is, how it fits into the broader security market, and then we'll get into some of the use cases that can help explain it. And we'll also kind of show you how the product works in action as well. So just want to take a moment to set the stage a little bit here. If we look at the security world as it exists today, as the way it's always existed, it's very much threat-centric, meaning something bad happens and you react. And that's easy to do when you're able to build a wall, which is your perimeter, and you can control access in and out of that wall. So it's easy to classify actions and events as either good or bad, and you allow the good to go ahead and go through, and you're able to stop the bad and not allow that to happen. And that's all fine and dandy when you have a perimeter. But the rise of cloud and the rise of mobility have all but dissolved the perimeter. There's no perimeter anymore. So what used to be very black and white as far as classifying actions and events now has introduced a whole bunch of gray. And the reason being is because I don't know why something happened, so I don't know what to do with it. This is the equivalent of having a bunch of alerts and a bunch of events that are just sitting out there and you don't know what to do with it because you don't know why they happen. Okay? So here at ForcePoint, for people who be familiar with us or very familiar with us, we believe that things have to change. We believe human behavior is going to be the next evolution in cybersecurity. Because if you can understand why someone took an action, it's going to be much, much easier to be able to classify. And in fact, our vision is to be able to understand and respond to user intent to stop cybercrime before it occurs. That's a pretty bold statement there, to be able to stop it before it occurs. And today's discussion on UEBA, we're going to show you how we think that we're on the right path to be able to do that. So while it's going to be focused around UEBA, the platform, we're going to also touch on what ForcePoint is doing and to integrate analytics across the rest of the portfolio to make the broad portfolio that we have smarter and being able to implement smarter security. It's what we call risk adaptive protection. Now, we speak to a lot of customers, which is great. And the thing that we hear about most often from customers is that security is noisy. IDC right now is tracking over 2,000 security companies. And so what we're hearing from customers is that they're drowning in alerts. Lots of the customers we speak to get over 10,000 alerts daily. We have some of our very large customers that are receiving over 100,000 alerts daily. And you can do the math and you can see just how astronomical that becomes. And the difficult part for them is understanding, making heads or tails of these alerts. So there's a lot of gray in there that I was just talking about. And where do we focus our efforts? And what we found in speaking with them is that the places that they've been focusing their efforts half the time wasn't the right place, or is the wrong place, or is wasted effort. And as you can imagine, that's very frustrating. So Brian, I know you're on the line with us here today. If you don't mind, I would love to be able to get your perspective, in working with customers and hearing more about what customers are telling Optive around this particular challenge.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Antonio. Well, the title of the slide, it should say it all, right? There's just too much stuff, the noise. And most companies, they don't struggle with capturing data, right? Logging is easy. We could store logs. The challenge is making sense of it. So one of the questions that I get asked frequently is, how do I validate and prioritize all of these alerts, right? So how does UEBA help us do that? Validate, get rid of false positives, and then prioritize the alerts.
Okay, terrific. So it sounds like we're hearing a lot of the same stuff. One of the things that we hear about, as far as, being able to do just that prioritizing is SIM. SIM is great, but SIM does have some shortcomings. So if you think about what the environment, what the world was before SIM, or what a customer environment is prior to SIM, you have a bunch of technology tools, a bunch of security tools. Each one of those tools has its own console, and you're getting alerts coming from each one of those. So if we look at the image on the left, it's the equivalent of having 9 security tools, and each one of those with its own security console getting alerts. And by the way, it's not uncommon that we see customers with well over 20 security tools and security consoles. So for the pre-SIM era, before SIM was around, or even before customers adopt SIM, this is what an analyst would have to do to try to investigate. So in those myriad of consoles, all with alerts, they're having to try and find not just the needles, but the poisonous needles. So think of each one of those images as a haystack that has needles in it. Well, once SIM became available, or for ones that have adopted SIM, they're saying, hey, we can go ahead and just unify all that and just use one investigation tool. And that's great. Now, instead of logging into a bunch of tools, you only need to log into one tool. However, you also just got all of the alerts from all those other tools as well. It's the equivalent of having 9 different haystacks and combining all of that hay into one large haystack, along with all the needles that were in those haystacks along in one haystack as well. You still have the challenge to be able to find, not just the regular needles, but rather the poisonous needles as well. So it partially solved the problem, but didn't completely solve the problem. So this is where UEBA comes in, or analytics comes in. And by the way, the acronym UEBA stands for User and Entity Behavioral Analytics. A lot of folks just call them analytics because that's what they do. They analyze, right? And there's 3 primary values or 3 key takeaways you want with respect to analytics. First one is it's going to give you a holistic view of your users. It's going to show you where your problems are. It's going to show you the baseline. It's going to be able to allow people to say, hey, look, come look over here first. The other key value has to do with providing an informed analysis. If I can take in information from all of my data sources, structured as well as unstructured, I can be able to have an informed narrative around the intent of the user. And the last key takeaway is going to be flexibility and efficiency. We want to be able to there is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to analytics platform or UBA platform. So you want to have something to be able to make it their own for the organization. And you want to be able to have it tell your analysts, your security team, say, here are the poisonous needles, look here first, take care of these first. And we'll go into just a little bit more detail on each one of these key values and kind of how. So the first one is building holistic view of the user. There are many different data sources within an organization, many different data sources. And the more data sources that you can be able to provide, that you can be able to feed into it, the better your visibility of your user. Because what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to create a profile based on normal, which is going to create that baseline so you understand what anomalies look like and what bad behaviors look like, not just anomalies. Now keep in mind here, this is a different mindset from the other UEBA providers that are on the market. You know, we're not focusing on an entity, we're not focusing on the IP address, we're not focusing on the event. We're focusing on the user. We're correlating and tying everything back to the user. And the difference is the number of ingest sources can vary, and we can take them from just about any specific source. So it's not just the logs that you're getting from your firewalls. It's also the stuff like the badge data, the badge readers on the buildings. Who are your users emailing and chatting about, and what are they talking about? And then tying into places like the HR systems to understand if it's performance review time, because depending on how that went will also kind of show you any deviations from your baseline behavior of your user. Your UEBA platform, your analytics platform should be able to provide for you an informed analysis. So you want to be able to know not just the anomalies, but you want to know the changes in behavior to be able to understand, you know, when that risk profile changes. So you take your data sources, which are going to be on the left, you feed that into an analytics engine, and then you enrich that with other data like your HR data, like your building access data. And what you do is you get an informed narrative about that user. Okay, this is pretty much how all UEBA platforms work. The difference with the way ForcePoint works is the variety of data sources and also tying that back specifically to the user, because we're giving you a user-centric view of that behavior. And again, there is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to analytics, when it comes to UEBA. Okay? For the administrators, you know, there's a number of prepackaged data models and risk scenarios already within the product, but we give them the ability to be able to modify that. We give them the ability to modify those features. We give them the ability to be able to use their internal expertise such that they're ensured that they're getting or identifying the behaviors that they want to identify and ensuring that it makes it their own. One of the things that we hear a lot about is our ability to manage lexicons, or we give those customers the ability to do that. I've talked to customers that say, hey, all of our confidential projects or future projects are labeled as exotic cars. So do I have the ability to be able to enter Lamborghini and Ferrari and Maserati, because they're all exotic cars, and those are the phrases and the keywords that I want to search for. Can we do that? The answer is yes. I've been some places where they use Dr. Seuss characters for all their confidential projects. But the idea is, yes, we allow you to do that. Yes, we allow you to enter that. It kind of does the same concept if you think about DLP fingerprinting, but we're actually implementing that, you know, with logs. From an analyst perspective, you know, we provide an analytics dashboard, and we'll show you this here in the demo here in just a moment. We'll show you the dashboard. We've gotten fantastic feedback from customers, from partners, from analysts when we show them the dashboard and we show them just how easy it is to use and easy it is to navigate. We've made it extremely user-friendly. So we can show somebody, here's their risk score. But we can also take it one step further, and we can show you why that risk score is. So somebody says, hey, you're a high-risk person in, data exfiltration scenario, and they come back and say, oh yeah, prove it. Well, we give you the ability to prove it with the entity timeline. I'll show you that here in just a moment as well. It's the ability to be able to show your math and prove to somebody what actions, what events took place at what time of day that contributed to the risk score or the risk level that they do have. And you can deep dive into any of that, through the Explore page as well. Again, the point here is that we want to make your analysts very, very efficient. We're telling them, look here first. Here are the poisonous needles in this large stack of hay, and these are the ones that you should take care of first. So that's a little bit about the product and at a high level around how it works. Let's get into some use cases that what we're seeing people use this. The idea here is you want to be able to get insights around risk scenarios. So companies obviously want to protect their data, so they want to be able to watch for data exfiltration, especially if it's sensitive data. But the thing that customers also want to know about is, compromised users. Did the credentials of Joe in accounting get compromised? Is Joe in accounting really Joe in accounting? Or is Joe in accounting just being a malicious user because, his last performance review didn't go as well as he would have liked? So now he's doing things that are that showing signs of doing activity that's at higher risk. But what about other things like, corporate espionage, or maybe like employee flight risk, or maybe like workplace harassment? Those are all the things that we hear about on a regular basis that people or organizations want to be able to have a way to get better insights on that, hopefully to be able to prevent stuff like that before it happens. So Brian, I'd love to hear your perspective. Are these kind of some of the things that you're hearing, or what else are you hearing, or what are the things that are coming up regularly in your conversations with customers?
Yeah, certainly, Antonio. Data loss, as you have here, exfiltration is a concern for almost all organizations, right? We've been dealing with that. ForcePoint's been dealing with that for quite some time. But lately, we see the user, the identity, as the new perimeter, right? So we're being asked how to deal with account takeovers. How do I know if an activity I'm seeing is from an authorized user, or is it from a user's compromised account? So, I for one, I don't like coming back from vacation with thousands of messages sitting there waiting for me to just get stressed out on my first day back. So working on vacation doesn't sit well with the family. So when I log in at midnight company time, because that's 6 a.m. over in most of Europe, am I an attacker? Or am I just trying to get stuff done, without getting in trouble with the family? Am I just trying to get some stuff done? So how do you know when I'm logging in at a time that I'm not supposed to be, only because, like I said, I'm just in another part of the world and I need to get my stuff done? Is that something that the UEBA is going to be able to help me with? That these are the things that we're asked.
Absolutely. No, I deal with the exact same thing as well. But yeah, this is exactly what UEBA and this type of solution is going to be able to help identify, right? Let's kind of play that out just a little bit more, right? Determining what's normal versus abnormal behavior. Yeah. If we look at this quadrant here, we have on the horizontal axes critical user as well as a standard user. And then we have on the vertical axes standard data versus critical data, right? Well, either of those two users that are accessing standard data, that's going to be normal behavior. We'll watch for that and we'll keep an eye on it, but for the most part, we're pretty confident that that's standard activity, no cause for concern. But what about when you're on the right-hand side and you're one of those users and you're accessing critical data? If you're in the top right-hand quadrant, so this is pretty normal, but it's going to require more inspection. So that may be where you're sitting right there, where you're out in Europe and you're accessing the network, at midnight company local time, which is, the deviation from your normal baseline, right? But is that cause for concern? Well, not so much as the bottom right-hand corner where it's a standard user accessing critical data. That shouldn't be happening. That's the power of the analytics. That red quadrant in the bottom right-hand corner are the poisonous needles. And it's telling the analyst, look here first, take care of this first, because we know that this right here is a much higher risk. Take care of the poisonous needles first, and then you can look at, the other items. That's what most UEBA solutions do, and it's actually, pretty simple. But let's make it just a little tougher here. What if you have nothing but critical users and nothing but critical data? You think about a VP of engineering and a VP of HR. Both are VPs, both are critical users, both tend to have elevated privileges, but their roles and their needs to be able to access data, certain types of data and the type of data they handle is going to be very different, right? Because on the horizontal axes, we have employee salary data, which is a critical form of data, and then we also have source code data, another critical form of data. You want to be able to understand context around the data that's being handled. So if you have a VP of HR accessing employee salary data, that's normal activity, or it should know that it's normal activity. That's what you want to know, and that's not cause for concern. If you're a VP of engineering and you're accessing source code, again, you're getting context on the type of data that's being handled by the user based on their role. So that's normal as well. No cause for concern. But what if the VP of engineering is accessing employee salary data? Is that cause for concern? Well, the answer is it depends, right? If it's review time, whether it's mid-year or end-of-year performance review, that could, very much well be, normal activity. But still, it's something that at least may raise an eyebrow. So we want to, that may require closer inspection. But what about having a VP of HR accessing source code? That should never happen. Under any circumstances, should a VP of HR be accessing source code here. So again, if we go back to our title of the slide, these are the poisonous needles. This is where you want to go look. This is the power of UEBA in allowing an analyst to know exactly where to go look first. And so again, UEBA, it's been around for a little while. It's emerging. It's a hot topic because of kind of what I just spoke about here. Companies are adopting this as part of their security, their security environments, their security ecosystems at a rapid rate. And I talked a little bit about kind of some of the, what sets ForcePoint apart, but so, just kind of coming back to that, we can source data from anywhere within the organization. In fact, we're the only company that can source both structured and unstructured data, including communication, so that way you have a full holistic view of the user with no detection gaps. Again, we're focused on the user, so we're focused on the behaviors of the users, not just the anomalies. And we can be able to provide precise narratives to be able to identify when behavior is unwanted. With respect to transparency, we show you the math, we show you the data models, we show you the features, we show you the slide rules and the weighting categories so you could be able to adjust that and modify that to make it fit every organization. And then not only that, but we show you the math as to how and why a risk score is what it is whenever you're being asked to prove it. So we talked a little bit about, kind of how it works, which is the part on the left. You get all the data sources, and there we have a number of data sources that can come in from ForcePoint. But there's also data sources, of the stuff that you own today. Companies have made investments already in threat-centric security. It's unrealistic to think that people are just going to throw that away. In fact, you shouldn't, because all of that is valuable information, valuable sources of data. But you feed that into the analytics engine, which I just covered that just a moment ago. But what we're doing with this information and where we're leapfrogging the competition has to do with enforcement and being able to take action. So if I'm an administrator, if I'm an analyst, and I was out for the weekend, do I want to come in and log in and say, hey, here are the poisonous needles, look here first, because a bunch of activity has happened, or do I want to come in and say, hey, there was a bunch of things that happened over the weekend. I've already taken a bunch of actions to be able to reduce the risk of the organization, but here are the poisonous needles, look here first, and here are the actions that I've already taken to reduce the risk of the organization. I'd rather have the latter.
So really good information, very much looking forward to the demo. But as Antonio just mentioned, Optive, while the name is only a few years old, at our roots, we've been around for over 20 years, right? And just as the security landscape has evolved, so has Optive. Right? We are a security solutions integrator. Our goal is to provide measurable value to our clients as they go down the path. That is the security program journey, right, as they work to mature their program. So as the wheel on the left lays out, we help our clients take a risk-based approach to tackling their security initiatives. It's from identification of a threat all the way through recovery, moving out regardless of the framework that's in place or whatever regulatory requirement our clients must abide by, right? Optive can help. Right. So what does that mean, right? At the most simplistic level, we can assist with a project. We can add a subject matter expert for a week to help get something done, right? We can also take on a problem, just like the one we're talking about today. How do I separate the noisy anomalies from the ones that are truly malicious? And then we can also go all the way up to the big picture, the program. How do I integrate all that? I've got all these different solutions. Do I need everyone? Can I figure out how I can gain some efficiencies by integrating what I do have, by taking advantage of ForcePoint UEBA to be the glue, if you will? Right? These are some of the things that we could do at that highest level, at that program level. All right, one of the things that we're asked is, well, what makes you different? Right? We've got the big fours. Our vendors sometimes give us free services, right? I've got this niche player. All they do is this, so they've got to be experts at it, right? Well, all that's true, right? There's no doubt about it. But as we're looking for this holistic review, is the plan solid? Did you build it properly? And then most importantly, do you know how to run it? Do you have the right people? Do you need a little augmentation with the staff you have? We don't need to go dwell into how short-staffed we all are in security, but this is essentially it. You can continue to stitch things together with the different providers out there, or you could look at Optive as this, again, security solutions integrator who can do from beginning to end, and really there is no end, right? We know that. It's never going to end. It's just going to keep going. So how do we gain efficiencies? How do we measure that? Can we even help you prove ROI? When you put something forth, you got to go in front of your board, and they ask you, why did you buy this? Well, here's why we bought it. Well, and what did that do for us? Well, look at our help desk now. We've just gone from hours to deal with an incident to minutes. And some of the stuff we've automated, it happens in seconds. So we never would have thought some of this stuff could be automated with high confidence and get us to the next level within a matter of seconds. So finally, very, very difficult to lay out in just a couple of minutes what Optive does. But as we see here, the integration process, as mentioned before, the planning stage. How do you connect? The configuration, the services. You know, these are the domains that Optive lives within, right? And moving back to that concept of let's not buy a tool because one of the industry analysts puts it up at the top. Let's implement a solution because it solves one of our problems. We can actually tie it to a business goal, a strategic move forward for our company, and we know with confidence that this was the right move. So with that, I think for one, I'm very interested to see your demo. I think you guys got a little bit of a facelift and some really cool stuff that so I'm going to hand it back over to you, Antonio, and let's give everybody what they're looking for.
All right, Brian, terrific. Thanks. Yep, let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and dive into the demo. Okay, so here's the product. We're in the UEBA dashboard. This is what we call the analytics dashboard. This would be the first screen that would be seen when you log in. So here in the top right hand part, or in the top part of the dashboard, you see the health of the overall organization. If we go here to the left-hand part of the screen, we see the top entities of interest. And if we scroll down, as you can see, these are sequenced these are prioritized in order of the highest persons of interest or risk actors. When I highlight a specific person here on the screen, we'll be able to see their information, just a dashboard of information for them load here on the right-hand side. So these at the very top, these are the poisonous needles. These are what we've been talking about this whole time of telling an analyst, look here first. So we give this, we make this very simple for the user to be able to know exactly where to go in. This is stuff that we've shown to analysts and to partners and to customers, and they're wowed by how simplistic and how easy it is to be able to work in the console. So here we see this particular user here. His name is Chad Pursley. And we get a little bit of information about him that says his risk score is 99, which is higher than the average of 49 over the past week. And their highest risk score right now is the compromised user scenario, which is 99. So right now, the active scenarios we're looking at are illicit behavior, malicious user, data exfiltration, compromised user, and negative behavior. And as I scroll through them, it will highlight the specific part on the graph with that risk score. If we look down a little bit, then we can get a comparison to Chad versus that of his department, his location, and even himself over time as well. And here we have this little risk level tab right here if we just want to have a dashboard view and see what's happened, to his risk score, the way it's changed over the past several days. But in this case here, we know that his risk score, his highest risk score, is going to be with compromised users. So I go over here into the active scenarios, compromised user, and I click on that. And then we get into the entity timeline. This is what we talked about a moment ago when you say, hey, you have a risk score of X, and they say, well, yeah, we'll prove it. Well, this is where you can go ahead and prove it. This is where we're showing the math, okay? So we look at his activity, and for the most part, his activity, was fine right up until about between the hours of 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. yesterday, where all of a sudden his risk score was elevated. And we can hover over these particular sections, these particular boxes here, and it tells us a little bit more about what happened during that time and which models were tripped in order that contributed to that risk score. So if I click on one, I can start viewing the actual events that took place. Now we provide the ability to collapse that view if you just want to have a quick view to be able to see what happened sequenced by the day. Or we can go ahead and expand them all where we can dig into a little bit more information. So here we see that at 5 a.m., something happened, which was a phishing language, hyperlink, and a risk score. And if we click on it, we can actually see what did Chad receive. So it looks like he received something from what appeared to be the help desk of his organization that says, Chad, we've identified that your workstation is missing a critical vulnerability that was where companies have already been compromised. You must download and install this patch, and it gives them the link to the patch. Okay, so this is a phishing attempt here, and it gives us the information and the flags on what was called out with this particular event. We go from the 5 o'clock hour to the 6 o'clock hour, and here we see that he actually went ahead and he assumed that it was in fact from his own company's help desk, so he downloaded that patch. It looks like the patch was installed, and I'm using patch in air quotes because I think we all know at this point that that wasn't coming from his help desk. And then in the 7 o'clock hour, and 7 o'clock in the morning, we see all of a sudden a whole bunch of traffic, going to different IP addresses. So if we click on one of these, we say, well, let's see what's happening here. We can see, oh, there's traffic that's coming. There's a traffic that's consistent with the command and control activity. So he's been owned, or his account has been owned, or his machine's been owned. He is now part of a bot. And we can see all of the different actions that have been taken during the 7 o'clock hour, all of the traffic activity that's coming in from the IDS device that the customer has within their environment to be able to know that this, in fact, is malicious traffic. Looks like not much has happened, during the day. This was probably the attacker trying to ensure that they had connectivity until later in the afternoon, where we see some VPN login attempts from different parts of the world, Russia, US, and China. And it looks like here later on within that day, there were some executables that were running or attempted to run, or that started running on this particular machine here. So this is how, as an analyst, they're able to come in and they're able to say, oh, here are all the events that took place. Here's the sequence of when these events took place, and they're able to make and they're able to get intelligent insights, and they're able to form that narrative for this particular user here. Now, once they're done with that particular user, they can go back to the main dashboard, and now they can focus their efforts on the next user. And again, we prioritize the users for the analysts. So hopefully that provides a quick view and just how easy it is to work within the product, how easy it would be for an analyst to be able to come in here and know exactly, where to start focusing their efforts and get the insights such that they can be able to help the business make intelligent decisions around users, around their security, and take next action. So in this case, since we're able to validate that this person was a victim of or this person was phished, they can quarantine the machine and clean the machine, and force a credential upgrade as well on this machine, and do whatever other remediation steps that they deem necessary for their particular organization. Okay, so that was a glimpse into what I wanted to share with respect to the demo. I mean, obviously there's a lot in there, and we'd love to be able to share a lot more with you, in a future engagement. So, engage Optive, and we would love to be able to show you more. But if we go back to the presentation now, if we take a look at, everything that we talked about here today, there's three big takeaways that want everybody to make sure that they understand. Number one, organizations, the security organizations cannot separate, or having a hard time separating signal from noise when it comes to the volume of alerts. There's too many alerts that are out there, and they need help with making heads or tails of them. And hopefully you saw, just a glimpse in the demo on how UEBA can help organizations with those alerts and help them identify those poisonous needles quickly, so they know exactly where to be able to focus their efforts and be more efficient. And again, the biggest difference between ForcePoint's UEBA and that of everybody else around on the market is that we're focusing everything, all the behaviors as they relate and correlating them back to the user. Everything we do is about the user. It's human behavior, it's user-centric security. Because if we can provide context and an understanding of intent, it's going to be able to help drive better enforcement. So at this point, I think we're going to get into the Q&A session. So I'll go ahead and turn it back to you, Mindy. So Mindy, can you take us through the Q&A section from here, please?
Thanks, Brian and Antonio. That was a really informative webinar. So just a quick reminder, you can post your questions into the Q&A chat box, and we're going to start answering some of them. All right, our first question. In the demo, you had the names of people in the organizations. We have strict privacy guidelines, so how do we maintain privacy for those users?
So that's a great question. Yeah, the demo did have names in there. One of the things that we hear on a regular basis is just that, particularly ones that are concerned with abuse of a potential analyst or administrator saying, hey, I want to see what Johnny in accounting is doing today, or the sites he's been on, or kind of how he's handling kind of the different assets. And so what we've done within the product is we actually have an ability to be able to anonymize all those names and use pseudonyms. And so what that means is that instead of seeing John Smith and seeing his activity that he's doing, the person would see a random pseudonym like, Red Squirrel 45. And every single one of the names in there would be assigned a random pseudonym like that. And what we found, many of the customers that we work with, is that they'll put policies or processes in place such that the only way the actual name of the person is revealed is if there's a formal case that's been opened, whether it be by HR or legal, that says this is a person of interest that we're investigating. We need you to reveal, or we need to have the name of this person revealed and see, which one of these random, pseudonames are in fact this person. So that's what we've done within the product. It's something that we're more than happy to demo for any of your prospects that are interested.
Yeah, hey, Antonio, listening to you explain that, made me think of GDPR, of course, right? Everybody is concerned with the privacy that comes along with that being the P part. So imagining it's pretty easy to just extend that ability to anonymize people into any of these regulatory requirements. And
absolutely.
Prove it, right? Auditing. So think about it from that perspective. We're being audited. We have to prove that it's been anonymized, what have you. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We're able to capture all that, and we can also be able to help somebody demonstrate this is how we're maintaining the privacy with everybody, in there, and this is also the controls that are in place with respect to who has access to be able to see the actual name, such that, just not anybody that logs in, even the administrators just can't log in and say, like I said, wonder what Tim in sales is doing today. So yeah, we heard that a lot. That was a big source of feedback that we took, and we've introduced that into the product here a couple versions ago, and thus far it's been received very, very well. But yeah, it's very much Europe leading the charge with respect to privacy regulations for GDPR.
Great, thanks.
Awesome. All right, so next question that we have is it possible to use UEBA for IoT devices like healthcare or critical infrastructure that has been hijacked or behaving erratically? Can we recognize a MAC address and not rely on a login or Active Directory?
Wow, great question there. The short answer is yes. You can absolutely use UEBA for IoT devices. The longer answer is, I guess the way we do it is we can either use the MAC address. We use the MAC address basically the same way for any device, and that is, the events, that we ingest include, the MAC address, The data that we use, would treat the MAC address as a role, and essentially the entity resolution key lists an entity identifier for each MAC address that we expect to encounter. So IoT devices, they're going to have a certain baseline behavior just like a user would, and so we're able to detect deviations from that particular baseline behavior, and then we can make some alerts and alert some folks in the event that something like that happens. So the answer is yes, we can absolutely do it.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
I would imagine that, so just to expand on that, I mean, I know you brought up healthcare, but one of the areas that we're seeing even more interest is in manufacturing, especially high-tech manufacturing, and then also, of course, our other industrial control systems and energy. So NERC SIP, right, energy regulatory. So I'm guessing, Antonio, that being who you guys are, you've been in that space a little bit.
Right. Yeah, we have.
And very.
Yep.
Yeah. So I want to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Just every device that's out there, everything that's out there is going to have some sort of, behavior profile or a baseline that can be established. When you think of stuff like, anything in the healthcare industry, anything that's related to critical infrastructure, what they're going to do is they're going to have a very controlled update process. It's not like our desktops where every Tuesday you patch Tuesday, something's going to happen to uploads. I mean, it's a very controlled process, and for the most part, very predictable process as well. So by being able to identify that and putting that as part of the, these are when we expect this particular system to start doing something different or deviate from the baseline, again, this will help you prevent some of those false positives because there's things that are going to be happening to be able to protect all those machines, and then you establish that new baseline once that's done. So yeah, I mean we span the gamut of whether it's critical infrastructure or healthcare, financial services, kind of pretty much all industries that right now.
Awesome. So somebody was wondering, what if I don't have other ForcePoint products? Is there still value in UEBA?
So UEBA as a category is still considered to be an up-and-coming category according to the analysts. There's some some vendors out there that have some of the functionality as a feature in another core product, so then it only works with whatever core product that they have. Others have it as a standalone product, meaning that you can go ahead and implement it regardless of whatever your current IT infrastructure is. So ForcePoint UEBA is the latter. It's a standalone product. It can be implemented into anyone's environment regardless of whether they have an existing ForcePoint footprint or now, and it's able to fully integrate with all of their existing IT infrastructure, all their existing investment, and be able to provide that insights into their particular environment so that they can be able to improve their security posture as well as being able to take actions based on those insights as well. So the answer is absolutely.
Awesome. And then kind of following that, do you charge by the amount of data, by the number of sources, or by the number of users?
So we charge by the number of users, and the reason for that is because we never want to have data sources or the amount of data be an inhibitor to be able to get the strong insights that an organization would want. Nowadays, I mean, everybody knows, you've been in this industry for a while, is data is just continuing to explode year after year after year. So the more data that you feed it, the better accuracy that you're going to get. So because of that, we chose the route of being able to go down the road of users, which is a much more predictable cost for organizations rather than by the amount of data, which can get really, really large in a hurry.
All right. Got a couple more questions in the queue. So what is the agent footprint for UEBA?
That's easy. There's none. Our UEBA product is not one of those that you have to put a client agent on a Mac system or on a Windows system or whatever the case may be. There is no agent using ForcePoint UEBA. We have a public available API for organizations or for systems who have data that's available, and where an API is not available, we have other formats that we support to be able to ingest the data. But there is no agent on the client machines with ForcePoint UEBA.
Okay. Well, how often do risk scores get updated?
So we have two things. We have a risk score and we have a risk level. The risk score in the demo is the actual numerical value that you see for a user. Those scores get updated hourly, okay? And people can go ahead and modify that particular threshold or that particular timing if they want. But typically, we typically have most of our implementations updating hourly. The risk level, on the other hand, was the color-coded section of the demo, and that means that in which particular band does it put you in. The actual risk level actually stays at that color band at a much, much longer time frame. So risk scores change quickly, the risk levels change very slowly, because somebody who engaged in a risky behavior that maybe you could tell was an accident, didn't mean to, while their risk score might have gotten elevated, that wasn't enough, or they didn't engage in that activity for enough time or did enough things on that activity to justify at a higher risk level. And the same is true the opposite way, such that if somebody's doing a number of things that are of high risk, then yeah, we're going to want that at risk level to be higher level for a longer period of time, and just have that decay very slowly, based on the following activities that are non-risky for the users. So that's the risk scores hourly, but the risk level takes over the course of days.
Gotcha. All right, so what are some common use cases? Do you have examples of data models?
There's a few that we see pretty regularly. Data exfiltration is the one that comes up 99.9% of the time. People want to know, especially when it comes to employees that are separating from an organization, whether it's voluntary or by force. So that's the number one thing, is data exfiltration. Beyond that, the other stuff that we see, the other use cases we see on a regular basis would be to identify IT sabotage. So, in that instance that we saw just a moment ago, we had a phishing risk that we were showing, but that could have very well also been somebody, a disgruntled employee who wants to get back at the organization because they feel like they've been wronged, and they start doing things and maybe start planting things into the systems to detonate, right after they leave. Other things that we see on a pretty regular basis, or use cases that organizations want to be able to have visibility to, would be stuff like workplace harassment, things like inappropriate emails, instant messaging, stuff that's posted on social media in negative context about an employee or even about the organization. All of those are code of conduct violations. So those are just kind of a few of the things that we see on a regular basis. Do you have anything you want to add to that one, Brian, as far as working with your customers?
Yeah, so use cases are always based on, well, I shouldn't say always, typically based on the maturity of the organization, right? So we would like to stop it at infection. But there's so many things that are going on within an organization where that just may not be feasible. So I would agree with you that exfiltration is well, that's the end of the game. So certainly we've got most requests for, all right, if we're going to get infected, if they're going to move around laterally, could you at least stop us from losing data, stop us from getting into the newspaper, onto Krebs or what have you. So yeah, I think we're in alignment there. But as organizations mature, they'd like to see us get a little bit earlier into the kill chain. So, you know, it reminded me of the score that you were explaining about, the couple different risk scores, and I believe you've got that attached to the kill chain. And so if you've got different groups of people, you know, you've got the hunters, the threat hunters, they're looking for infections, they're looking for lateral movement, then you know, they're able to use your UABA to pivot to that screen, if you will, and look at, well, what could be going on versus the incident responders, what did go on, those types of things. So not sure it makes sense, right? Different use cases for different teams and different maturity levels of the organization.
Absolutely. Yep. No, you're right on. You're spot on.
Awesome. All right. Well, we've got 2 more questions. As a reminder, you can submit your questions into the Q&A chat box. Does this replace SIEM?
Does this replace SIM? Get this question a lot. The answer is no, it does not replace SIM. SIM is collection of machine data, and it collects everything for as long as they've had it from all sources and keeps it forever. UEBA is focused on more the hundreds of decisions that a person is going to make per day, and it's looking at its behavioral profile over the course of a rolling 3 months. So it doesn't necessarily care what somebody's behavior was 2 years ago. I mean, I guess that would be important, right? But more than anything, they want to know what's happened with this person over the past few months, what's their behavior been over the past few months, because that's a more accurate depiction of what normal should look like for them, as well as what anomalous looks like for them as well. UEBA can take the information from SIM and narrow that down and be able to, again, you know, provide what we've been talking about, the poisonous needles, to be able to focus on first. But at the end of the day, you know, we have a number of implementations of UEBA where customers don't have SIM. So SIM is great. It definitely has their place. It's not necessarily, they're basically solving 2 different things at the end of the day is what they're doing.
All right, awesome. And then our last question is cloud deployment or on-prem?
The answer is both. Most of our customers like the benefits of cloud, although we do offer both for, you know, give the customer, you know, the maximum choice.
All right. Well, looks like those are all the questions that we had. So that concludes today's webinar. I want to thank everyone for participating, especially our speakers, and we hope that you enjoyed the presentation. A follow-up email with slides will be sent to you shortly, which will include the links to review today's webinar regarding recording and additional resources. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.